Hello, this video is an analysis of the impact that mask utilization has on the transmission of SARS-CoV-2. The goals for this video are pretty straightforward. First and foremost, I want to demonstrate that mask utilization and especially mask mandates do not directly cause a reduction in SARS-CoV-2 transmission. Secondly, I want to demonstrate that many areas with high mask utilization are experiencing sustained transmission. In other words, the masks are not stopping the virus from spreading the way you'd expect. Lastly, I'll show you the other side of that coin by demonstrating that many areas with low mask utilization are experiencing reduced transmission, even with their economies relatively open. The entirety of this video will rely upon data compiled by the New York Times for an article that was published on July 17th. Here you see a heat map of the United States, which measures how likely you are to encounter people wearing masks out in public. Darker spots mean more mask usage. If the popular opinion coming from the health experts is correct, then it would be safe to assume that areas with higher mask utilization should experience reduction in transmission, and areas with lower mask utilization should experience increased transmission. What we're going to do in this video is put that one simple theory to the test. Let's start with the big boys, California and New York. First, let's observe that their heat maps are pretty similar. Both of them seem to show a high degree of mask utilization, and both of them have relatively extreme mask mandates compared to other states. What is interesting is that despite the similar acceptance of masks, they have radically different case curves. California has gone up from the beginning, and New York has come down from the beginning. The reason that California has gone up, up, and up is because they have relatively low herd immunity, which I calculate at 8%. New York has an extraordinary level of herd immunity based on their immense death toll suffered in April. Their herd immunity, combined with their relative economic lockdown, has kept cases low and stable. Somewhat interestingly, California has recently enacted a renewed economic lockdown, specifically shuttering indoor commerce, including gyms, bars, and even churches. This belated lockdown is an admission from Governor Newsom that the mask mandate implemented on June 18th didn't really help all that much. It's not like people didn't comply with the mask mandate. According to the heat map, California is at least as compliant as New York. Luckily for California, economic lockdown does indeed help to slow the spread, so we can reasonably expect their cases to begin to fall here in the next couple weeks. However, until they achieve herd immunity, their cases will accelerate if they step off the brakes. It is unavoidable, and it appears that masks won't save them. They must pass through the eye of the storm. Next, let's compare New Mexico and Arizona. New Mexico is a fascinating state to follow because they have had one of the very first mask mandates and have been back and forth between economic lockdowns throughout the pandemic. Arizona was very reluctant with economic lockdowns and also with mask usage, so they got hit rather hard in June. Despite the two states having similar mask utilization and similar economic lockdowns over the last month, New Mexico cases have continued to rise while Arizona has started to come down. Transmission clearly isn't being heavily influenced by mask usage. Really, the only discernible difference between the two states is how much herd immunity they have attained. At 11% herd immunity, New Mexico is still somewhat unprotected. Arizona is showing 17% herd immunity, but their real number is actually much higher because their death is peaking right now. So they're likely already at 20% and will surge to 25% or more by the time their death curve fully flattens. Again, two states with very similar mask utilization and economic lockdown, but wildly different transmission. Now let's turn the heat up and look at a couple states that show the complete opposite of the mask utilization hypothesis. North Carolina clearly has much higher utilization than South Carolina, and yet North Carolina cases won't seem to chill out, while South Carolina appears to be trickling downward. What makes this state-to-state comparison extra juicy is the fact that North Carolina, as a Democrat-governed state, has attempted way more economic lockdown than South Carolina has, yet their cases are the ones rising, and it's happening despite much more obedient compliance with the mask Gestapo. You want to know the real difference between them? It rhymes with schmerd-immunity. Lastly, let's ask ourselves a basic question. Shouldn't states with very low mask utilization have out-of-control transmission? Especially if their economy is open, doesn't that mean that they are completely unprotected without their masks? The answer is no. There are several states with very low mask utilization who are doing just fine without rapid acceleration of transmission. The most fascinating thing about these states is that they all have relatively low herd immunity, so there is definitely room for transmission to occur. Why is it not happening? Something besides mask usage and economic lockdown must be protecting them, or else their case curve would look like California or New Mexico or North Carolina. Now, to be fair, there are current surges happening in several states that have low mask utilization. This slide isn't intended to suggest that states with low herd immunity and low mask compliance will never go up. Of course they eventually will. It's just meant to point out that low mask utilization doesn't necessarily imply accelerated transmission, even in the states that are ripe for it. Now that we've looked at a few examples from within the United States, let's turn and look at the even more compelling evidence from other countries. Here you see a chart on the left showing survey results from various countries. The countries with a lot of red have a lot of people saying that they always wear a mask when they leave the house. The countries with a lot of gray have a lot of people saying that they never wear a mask when they leave the house. You'll notice that this data was compiled over a month ago, and yet it did absolutely nothing to predict what countries would have things under control. The Philippines and Mexico, the gold and silver medal winners for mask obedience, are experiencing sustained transmission surges. Countries that were praised for having conquered coronavirus, like Hong Kong and Japan, are experiencing case resurgences despite world-class mask usage. Even Spain is experiencing a resurgence. A lot of people think that Spain and Italy are done with the virus because they were hammered so hard in March. In actuality, they're sitting at the lower end of herd immunity, about on par with Pennsylvania or Michigan. This means that they still have a ways to go, and their bronze medal winning mask compliance isn't going to stop them from getting there. Lastly, let's look at some countries which have decided to forego the mask. These countries should be showing massive transmission. Two of these countries, the United Kingdom and Sweden, have achieved herd immunity levels that are protecting their population. The others are achieving low transmission with good old-fashioned personal hygiene and physical distancing. No mask needed, no fights in stores, no threats, no fines, just normal, level-headed public policy. It should be quite astonishing to you to see so many of these countries who are able to control the virus without mask usage. Now, what if I told you that the United Kingdom, despite achieving herd immunity and completely crushing their case counts, just implemented a mask mandate last week? Would that make you question what's going on? If they flattened their curve and achieved a solid level of immunity without really ever wearing masks, why on earth should they be forced to wear them now? I know what you'll say. You'll say that we want to prevent a second surge. We want to make sure that we conquer this virus once and for all. And to that, I would ask you, how did that work out for Hong Kong, or for Japan, or for Spain? Let's revisit the goals of this video to see how I did. Hopefully, I was able to convince you that mask utilization and mask mandates do not directly reduce transmission. Hopefully, you now believe that many places with high mask utilization can and do experience sustained transmission. This includes many states like California, New Mexico, and North Carolina, and also countries like the Philippines, Mexico, Japan, and Spain. Lastly, I hope that I've shown you that places with low mask utilization can and do experience low transmission, including states like Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Maine, and also countries like the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Scandinavia. If you have any thoughts, comments, or questions about this video, please email us at reopenbucks@gmail.com. If you want to send me a study to prove that masks work, then I'd ask you to please not send any of those simulated models, as all of the models have consistently been wrong. I'd tell you to go ahead and send me randomized controlled trials, but all of those that have been done show that masks don't really do much. So maybe just use population-based data from states or countries to show me that masks are a critical factor. I bet you can't do it.